Hello, I'm Mark Williams, and earlier in 2021, Gethin Ellis and myself started the PHIT podcast. Here at gethinellis.com and Wide End Limited, we know that whilst physical fitness is essential, our mental health is vital too, and our PHIT podcast is all about putting the human back into technology, aka PHIT. Building on us all coping during unprecedented times in Series 1, available on our website www.gethinellis.com and YouTube, search for Gethin Ellis, we felt in Series 2 it might help us all to hear more thoughts and advice from normal, everyday humans just like you. So we're again speaking with a range of humans in technology, business, consulting and other areas to hear what they've learned and how they intend to apply that experience in dealing with today's challenges and their futures. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to part 2. We're still with Simon Ellis. He's still here with us, thankfully. Simon, hello again.
No problem at all. I'm enjoying it.
Okay, well, let's go straight into the questions. And to some degree, we talked a little bit about people behaviours, and we've talked a little bit about businesses and maybe how they should be thinking about their strategies and finding time for things. And we've talked a bit about digital, particularly, we were talking in I think it was in the last question actually, or the last but one question about, perhaps the industry that we're involved with and you've been involved with, most if not all of your life, I think, and maybe learning something from some other industries. But this question, it's phrased as digital transformation. And I must admit, I'm not, and for me, is it digital? I'm not going to get too hung up on whether it's really digital or not, frankly. But what do you think? What do you think most organisations need to be doing or should be doing? Is it that they need to genuinely transform? Because to me and many people that means wholesale change and so on. Or do you think it's more about moving forwards, about continuous improvement? And I'm not trying to get too hung up on the definitions there, but I'm sure you'll get where my question is going. What do you think is that most organisations need to be doing, and more importantly, why?
Okay, so I think the term digital transformation is slightly dangerous because it implies something very sudden. And massively transformative, like falling off a cliff or something. I think that organisations, when we talk about applying technologies, should we put it that way?
Yeah.
Are tempted to look at improving their internal processes and systems and data management, etc., because it's more technical. It's in a way it's more obvious, and the payback is cost savings or time savings. So the payback is clearer. There's a finite amount of that you can do before you're disappearing up yourself a bit. And I think that the real challenge is how to reorientate the business to the way in which customers, whether they're business customers or end consumers, want to interact with you. And that is much riskier because you don't know what they're going to reward you for. And the reward won't come in cost savings. It may come in growth or sales. The problem is, if you don't do it, your customers will go to somebody else and you won't know how or why or when. But you'll know that it's happened because your business will suddenly end up in a very difficult place and it'll be impossible to get out quickly enough. So it's one of those things that no CFO or CTO wants to invest somewhat blindly. But I think that's almost what you have to do. That's why I think it has to be incremental. Because, again, you can't just say, right, we're going to become a digital business and we'll throw everything online and everything will be web-based and cloud-based, etc. Because that's the chances of you spending lots and lots of money on things that prove to be irrelevant or don't work is too high. Yeah. But I do think organisations should commit themselves to an amount of spend on exploring digital ideas and digital futures, and just say that's R&D. Put it in a different headspace. It's R&D. It's going to be entirely dedicated to improving the interaction between our technologies and customers' technologies, and we'll find out how it works. And if it ends up that we spend lots of money and we don't get much payback, well, that's money still well spent because we had to find out.
Yeah. Okay, that's interesting. Well, right at the start, I don't really know where I'm going to go with this question. Right at the start, you basically said you've worked for or indeed advising essentially large companies, large financial services type companies for most of your life, and you mentioned a few of them. They all have thousands, if not many thousands of employees. Particularly, the last largest one that you mentioned, all over the world,
hundreds of thousands.
Yeah, indeed. I think at one point they were the biggest company on the planet from memory, not all that long ago. But anyway, but then you've also got the 20, 30, 40, 50 man strong companies, not necessarily financial services now, just any organization, whatever they might be in. My mind was going down the question of are there trying to think about that advice that you've just offered, which is essentially, look, we've got to have a go at this. We've got to, we've got to try. It always seems to me, perhaps looking from the outside a little bit, that these large organisations find it really difficult to try because they're so damn large, and everything that they touch is large, so there's no concept of a nice little pilot you can do somewhere for a little bit to try something. And then if you look at the smaller organization, you might say, well, actually they could probably find something a bit smaller to have a look at, but if they got the time to look in it, if they got the money to invest and the resources to invest in it, and I kind of wonder, there are obviously barriers to all sorts of organisations, aren't they, taking these things forwards? Is it mindset, do you think, at the end of the day, that's stopping people from doing it, or do you genuinely think?
So like you said, you look at very interesting things there. The large organisations don't have the time, and you can't get the budget, and the small businesses don't have the time and haven't got the money. You don't have the budget. No one has. You've never got time. And you've never got enough money. I've worked in very large organisations, and you've never got enough budget to do things you want to do. Those are facts of business, facts of life, if you like. The answer is senior people have to make time. I've used that expression 2 or 3 times already. Yeah. You have to make time because it's your job. If you're the CEO or anywhere near the CEO, it is your job to make time to think and find out, because otherwise you're just administering an organization. You can be driving it to different places, etc., but you're stuck in the tram lines trying to make it happen in this context, and that will keep you going for a period of time. But the problem is the future is not going to be on that narrow horizon. Like parallel lines, they converge and then they run out. Your job is partly to think about outside the parallel lines and imagine a different future. Classic example is Kodak, where they were in the film business and printing business. They knew about digital cameras. They had the choice to make digital cameras, but they were so busy making films and making money out of making films and all the stuff related technologies and industries that they ran out of road. It was too late. And that is the signal lesson of business for me. You have to make time. Now, in this context, how do you do that? What you're going to do is spend time with people who are not doing what you're doing. So go and talk to people doing things, whether it's fintech, regtech, or whatever form of tech. There's a little word before the tech in your sector. Go and find what they're doing, because what these people are doing, in my opinion, it's like a biological model, is they're nibbling away at the edges. They find a little thing that's in your value chain that they can do better than you can. And you want to find out what it is. Because A, they could end up eating you, or if multiple ones of them, it's like piranhas. If they're all biting off little bits and pieces, you end up being eaten. But secondly, if they find something which isn't done very well, or something else that isn't done very well, you add them all up and go, well, listen, there's 4 or 5 of them doing that, and 3 or 4 of them doing that. What's this telling me? My job is to think, what are they telling me? Why are these people doing these things? So the answer to the question is, you'll never have enough time, you'll never have enough money, but it's your job. So you must make time. And secondly, talk to people in and around your sector and just try and find out what are other people doing, what are people thinking? Because you should have a useful sense of paranoia. Someone else is trying to put you out of business.
I like that.
Right? You should be paranoid. Someone else is trying to put you out of business or compete you into a position where you're a loser. So what are they thinking and doing that I need to respond to? And if I can work that out in advance, I've got an advantage.
Question 2 in this section then. We talk quite a lot actually about perhaps some of the easier initiative considerations. You described it as data initiatives or some technology change initiatives and so on and so forth earlier. We've also talked a lot about that very last point, essentially about people and thinking. So in trying to drive things forwards, should there be a weighting factor between investment decisions, if you like, in say technology versus people, or should it be a holistic thing of the whole thing together, or should you essentially be saying, do you know what, I'm just going to focus on my people because everything else will follow, as a result of that? What's your view?
It's a really hard question. You can't take your eyes off the day job. And if I was to be self-critical, I'd say at times I've tended to look too much at building and looking for the future rather than just doing what had to be done today. And so you've got to make sure that the business is running as well as it possibly can to be successful in the short term. But at the same time, in looking beyond that, I think you do have to have some discipline. Once you've gone through, I've talked a lot about, you could describe it as blue sky thinking or whatever else. What David Kahneman would describe as system 2 thinking. System 2 thinking is hard. This is not easy. It's not instinctive. You can't just, we'll do this, this, and this, and that will happen. You've got to sit down and extrapolate and think and talk to other people and literally, sit down and read stuff. And it's hard. But once you've done that and you've got a hypothesis, let's put it that way, you've got an idea, think, this is something we should look into, then you need to start bringing some preliminary disciplines to it. So it does need to have some structure. And we talked very early on about funneling of thinking. You have to go to a process from, okay, we've got this thing up here, all very ethereal, and people say, what you think about that is a waste of time. Okay, well, the what is hard, but now we've got the what, let's pull it down to, now how do we do this? And how do we prioritize? And that needs discipline. You do need to start bringing in some rigor to the thinking. So you can't just say, well, let's go and build a brand new operating system, because we wouldn't be great to have a brand new operating system. Yes, it would. Let's go and build it. It ain't that easy. So, and then it's thinking through what parameters in the business context in which we operate. So it depends on your business. What's instinctively feels like where the quickest wins could be or the lowest risk could be, but also where the biggest prize should be. So I used the example of Kodak earlier on. In their case, they clearly didn't have the right criteria about they didn't have enough paranoia about the film business, and they didn't know how to weight the decision around the digital business, the digital camera business. Fuji did. So Fuji still exists. It's a more a camera manufacturer than it's a film manufacturer. So you've got to have some rigor and discipline. And the more down the pipe of development you go, the more rigor and discipline you have to have. So you'll know as a professional project manager that projects need to have very tight criteria built around them, strong discipline around the time management, expenditure management, etc. So you have contingency and all the rest of it. But once you got to the delivery point, it needs lots of structure. But I would argue that even as you're going further up the chain, because you have to prioritize. You've got limited resources and limited time in every single business context, as in your own life context. None of us have infinite money, and none of us certainly have infinite time. So you do have to start saying, what criteria do you wish to apply? And whether you use a balanced scorecard approach or some form of sort of notional project management, even when things are that sort of from ethereal to let's start bottoming this out a little bit. When you start bottoming it out, you have to have some criteria. Yeah. Otherwise, there's no bottom.
I I mean, I've learned a lot from working over the years, and some of it hopefully is useful to some people out there. But a lot of, to me, there is quite a lot. I mean, I'm not notwithstanding everything you've just said about about you've got to have the idea and start to shape it a little bit. Absolutely, of course you have. Otherwise, nothing starts in the first place. There's an awful lot of people who talk about, when you're delivering something in my world, okay, well, what we need to do is this, and I keep saying to them, how are you going to do it? How are you going to find those customers? How are you going to identify that process improvement or what?
So Mark, this is a really important point. So one of the things in when you're strategizing, and we talked in the earlier piece around having a vision, all that kind of thing, the reason you lose people is they don't understand how. Most people, in my experience, in the organization, they say, you tell me what you want me to do, and then I'll do it. What they actually mean is, you tell me what you want me to do and how you want me to do it. And if you don't tell them the how, or you don't listen to them as to how the how could be done better, you lose them.
Yeah.
So there's a very interesting story about the elephant and the rider, which I shan't go into today. But if anyone just types in elephant and rider, you'll see.
I'm going over here now.
Yeah. No, honestly, well, exactly. That's the point. Is the rider, the person sitting, the mahout sitting on top of the elephant, will have a very clear idea of where they want to go, and they can tell the elephant that's where we want to go, and they can hit it with a little stick to make it move in that general direction. And that is the logical brain. That is your senior leader, and they may be absolutely correct. But if the elephant wants to go a different direction because it isn't convinced, it's going to go a different direction. And that's the story of the elephant and the rider. There's a very interesting book around project management and more importantly, senior leadership on that particular story. So the how has to be worked out, because if people don't believe it's deliverable, they won't down tools. They'll just grind the wheels, because they'll think, well, there'll be somebody else along in a minute. He'll get fired, and we'll have a new CEO who understands. Because they say they don't understand.
Yeah. There was definitely one or two people in the business that we both worked in that were in the land of
You'll get some people who don't want to. Some people don't want you to succeed. And finding them and getting them out is really is important. But if you're always going to get some people who just resist or don't do their piece, as long as they're a very small number and not in positions of danger, you're okay, because the vast majority will go with you.
I was going to say, my take on that, Simon, is it's actually people don't knowingly know that they resist. Because I generally, I'm quite a sort of believer in people in general in business. I don't think people go into work to do a bad job. I think they go into work to do a good job. 99 times out of 100. And for me, it's a lot about the not that phrase. They don't knowingly resist, but they are.
Yes.
Perhaps because they're not bought in, they haven't understood where they fit in the chain, what it means for them.
Also, we shouldn't presume that everyone has work as the central feature of their life. It might take a lot of the time.
Yeah.
I recognise and respect the fact that most people just want to come in, do a decent job, get paid fairly. If they're working in with some nice people in a decent environment, that's enough for them. Yeah. And you need those people. Because if everybody was thrusting and determined to make progress, it'd be bloody chaos. And that happens in many partnerships. But fundamentally, I agree with you. I think most people just want to, they come in, they want to do a decent job, they want to be recognised when they're doing a decent job, they want to be treated fairly, and if at the end of all that they can say, I was there when we did this, a success happened, or we won that, or whatever else. And this is where the power of things like little competitions. One of the things that I learned in the place where you and I worked was how supervisors were managing teams of people in a call center. Now, most people will stand back and say, "Oh, call centers, it's 1,000 people like battery chickens all doing this, that, and the other," and you think, "Oh, that must be awful." But when you see it being done properly on the ground, with really engaging and engaged line supervisors, it's fantastic. And the people working there were happy. Yeah. If you look in a small team, they all related to each other, and a little bit of inter-team rivalry, but the power was the line supervisor. So the CEO of a large group up here will have no idea what the line supervisor's doing. But I recognise that that person was the most important person in that organisation, because they were the ones who were influencing how the customer service representatives talked to the customer. How valuable is that? Now, you can't pay all those people zillions, because their accountabilities, the range of their responsibilities doesn't justify that level of payment, I might argue, and it goes against what you just said. But recognising the value of that individual contribution and the individual customer service representative is really important for senior leaders to recognise, so that those people feel what they're doing is valued. And they'll come in every day and they'll do their job. They're not saying, I want to, they don't want to do what I'm doing or was doing. They don't want to be sitting in endless meetings talking about strategy and doing budgets and targets and project management things. So look, I just want to come in and do a decent job.
Yeah.
Brilliant. That's just what you need them to do. And more people, as long as you get all those people, as many of those people as you can, doing their job, the how, really, really well, that gives you the platform to think, right, now where would we go next?
So last but one question, and feel free to use something we've already talked about, because there's a hell of a lot of advice that you've given out here, which is brilliant. What advice would you give either your younger self or those maybe near the starting out end of their career? Or maybe even just thinking about changing their career. What sort of tips might you pass on to them that you know now?
Yeah, okay. Well, this one will sound slightly flip, but it's not meant to be. Always be a middleman.
Oh, hello. You're going to have to explain that.
All right. So this is not if you're when you're starting a career. One of the things that you look at our industry. We just take a very small slither of money out of people's portfolios or every little transaction, right? Yeah. So the beauty of being a middleman is you're taking a very, very small amount of money out of the value chain, but you add that up, and it can be phenomenally profitable and successful. So if you think about any industry, there are always people who are providing a connection or a network service or something that, what does Facebook do? It's just it's a middleman. It's just a middleman, right? So it's the equivalent in the digital age of striking oil in the late 1900s. So it sounds slightly flip. I mean it seriously. It's a good thing to be. The second thing, if I was giving careers advice, I would sadly come back to spend the time to know your stuff. Be smart. Secondly, work hard. And thirdly, care about the people you work with, care about the company's success, care about your customers, and not in that order. We go through these phases. Over a 40-year career, you're going to get phases, and then it's this, and then it's this. Now we're going into, quite rightly, a whole phase around environmental issues. But if you look after people, customers, colleagues, suppliers, by and large, they'll look after you. People don't want to do the dirty on you most of the time. Yeah. Particularly not in conventional business. There are people out there who want to do dirty things, but that's a different thing altogether. They're malintents. If you've got people who share your strategic intent, which is to be successful and happy, in a fairly conventional way, look after those people, and they will help you when you need to be helped, and vice versa.
Do you know? I'll ask you the last question now, but it's a shame. Unfortunately, Gethin, as you know, hasn't been able to make this particular session. But he would have loved listening to all of this stuff that you're imparting here. I'm
just going to give you a little example, Mark. So, in my career, I've been made redundant, I think it's 3 times, and each time, I worked out how to cope with the circumstances, and how to get myself re-employed. But I remember the people who reached out to me when it was announced or they became known and just sent a little note of sympathy, or not that I was looking for sympathy. They showed that they cared.
Yeah.
Right. That matters. I remember, not every single one of them, but I remember those moments and thinking, I'm not on my own. I haven't been fired. I'm not useless. no one cares. You see some of the things that, I mean, it's not a suicidal moment for someone like me, but the reasons why people get into that frame of mind. And so whenever I see someone going into one of those dark phases, or someone's relatives are ill or something else like that, I make a point of just showing them that I've noticed.
Yeah, it's
and
about
that I care enough to have noticed.
I was just going to say it's. I like to think, in business and in in sort of the personal life, that I always try to go more than halfway. With that relationship, and I guess another way of saying it is, I like to think I pay things forward, and I do things in advance, and it's I'm lucky. I get motivated by doing that, so I try to do it, but it does. And I always say, actually, this is about you, not about me, but I always say about me that I'm not dreadfully externally referenced, so I never really worry too much about what other people think. But even me, and somebody says to me, thanks, or appreciate that, or you've done a good job, or whatever, I'll go, oh yeah, that means something. And then there's something in this caring word and behaviour, associated with that absolutely. So, last question, intended to be a bit of a fun one. Tell me a fun fact about yourself that maybe not too many people or nobody else knows.
Well, that's a loaded question. Well, I've never run through a field of wheat, if that matters. Well, not knowingly, anyway. Fun fact. Well, I'd like to think there are so many, and there's lots of things I've done which. So one is, I'm very glad there wasn't CCTV around when I was in my early days in the city, because there were many moments when I was probably not fit for public consumption. Should we put it that way? I'll relate the outskirts of a story related to that. So I was taken home by the police from Whitehall for my own protection, following a fancy dress party. It was 4 o'clock in the morning, and I was a little worse for wear. And I'll leave it at that. You'll have to, one day I'll tell you what I was wearing and why the police thought it was not appropriate for me to be where I was at that time of night, and should be taken home to my little flat in Fulham. I was not arrested or anything. They just said, I think we probably better take you home now, hadn't we, sir? And I was like, all right.
So there's only one thing I can do now, Simon. I can say that was Simon Ellis, advisor to the best businesses out there. But no, genuinely, Simon, thank you very much. That was really, really good. Really enjoyed speaking with you, this morning, and I hope you enjoyed it too.
I did, Mark, and it's lovely to see you again. And I wish you success with what you're working on at the moment, and to your colleague Gethin as well. I hope that the work he's doing with these podcasts and for LinkedIn, etc., and for this and for the audience. Thank you very much. I hope I've said a couple of things that will be of use to people, and if not, that at least you've been entertained somehow or other.
You've definitely done both those things, Simon. Thank you very much.
Thank you.